Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
Hi everybody, Tobias here, and well, today is Veterans Day, November 11th. And man, things have definitely changed over the years here in the United States when it comes to Veterans Day. Besides the actual history of it, how it began as Armistice Day, shortly after World War I ended, and then shortly after World War II, it became Veterans Day. So instead of just honoring the veterans of World War I, it actually was honoring all veterans of all wars, and then eventually basically all veterans of the military. And well, it has even from when I was a kid, it has changed quite a bit. Because I don't think they do it anymore, but I know there is a law now that we're supposed to, the federal law has it that at 2:11 p.m. on November 11th, there should be a 2-minute period of silence to honor the veterans. So if you're doing some kind of veteran ceremony or something around that time at 2:11, you're supposed to have a 2-minute moment of silence to honor all the veterans out there. I don't know if Congress, I'm guessing Congress does that if it's in session, but I remember when I was a kid in grammar school back in Florida, we often, sometime around 10 or 10:30, the school would actually empty out, and all of us kids and everything would go outside and get by the flag, the American flag, out in front of the school. And at 11:11 or shortly before 11:11, they would blow taps and and they would lower the flag. Well, the flag was already at half staff, but then we would have a moment of silence at 11:11, and then we would sing, some kind of patriotic song or do the Star Spangled Banner or something, and then go back into school. So I don't think they do that anymore. I don't know what they do in school these days, but yeah, the entire school would empty out and they would do this, and then we'd talk about Veterans Day and stuff like that. Well, what the purpose of it was and everything else. Today, what you mostly see is on social media, you see the people who will come out and say, Veterans Day is for the living. That's for the people who served and are still alive, and we're honoring our veterans. And Memorial Day, that's the day in May where you're supposed to celebrate the ones who didn't make it back. That was originally Decoration Day. But, I have a feeling that actual veterans, on Veterans Day, I'm sure they think of their friends and fellow soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors who made it back and they've kept in touch with, and also the ones that they can't remember exactly what happened to them, but they have fond memories of them and things that happened and everything. But I can't imagine, especially veterans who served in combat, on such a day as Veterans Day, as not thinking about the ones who aren't here to celebrate Veterans Day. And now I am a veteran, but I never saw combat or anything. I was just in the Cold War. I was serving in Germany. And I tell you, every Veterans Day and every Memorial Day, I do think about 3 soldiers that I knew who died in an accident. It was a freak accident. The brakes on their Jeep failed and they ended up ramming into the back of a truck on on the Autobahn, and two of them died instantly, and one of them hung on for a couple hours, but died in a German hospital. And those three veterans, well, they're not veterans, I guess, but in any case, it was Corporal Lauren Dave Barrett, and he was my track commander. He was my track commander when I was with the company and before I went up to the brigade. And Scott Gary, I didn't know him. He was in a different platoon at the time. And Robert Philip Lane, he was the company armor, and that's what they were doing. They were going down to Nuremberg, I believe, to pick up some stuff from another base to bring it back, or from another post or barracks, and to bring it back up to, to the company. And one day they were here and one day they were gone. And anyway, that's one of the things that comes to my mind on Veterans Day. And most of the people I knew in the Army are still around. The other thing that I think about on Veterans Day is the fact that, the number has dropped. It used to be 22 a day. 22 veterans a day commit suicide. The number has dropped to 17 a day. But a lot of the veterans out there argue that, part of the reason the number has dropped is partly because fewer veterans are going into combat. There's more people who were lucky enough not to go into combat. Fewer and fewer people are actually, joining. There's fewer people in the military. And if you have fewer people in the military, you have fewer veterans. So there's more veterans carrying the load for the country. More soldiers are carrying the load for everybody. More people are willing to fight for the country, or fewer people are willing to fight for the freedom and liberty that America enjoys, which is kind of sad too. The idea of service doesn't mean what it used to, I guess. Anyway, you're not really here for all that. You're here to take a look at some knives, and I have three of them that I want to show you. The first one is a knife that actually dates back to 1917 and would have been issued to soldiers in World War I, and it was probably still being issued to them in World War II. One of the main reasons is because, World War I ended more abruptly than they thought it was going to be. So a lot of knives were made for World War I, expecting the war to go into 1919, but it never did. And so the U.S. Army, or the Department of War at the time, had plenty of extra kit that they just mothballed until the next war, which ended up being World War II. And the other two knives I have here are museum quality reproductions of knives that were also developed for fighting in the trenches of World War I. One of them only served in World War I. One of them saw a brief service in World War I, but mostly served during World War II. But let's start with the original. This is an original knife. They are making copies of this knife now. I'm not sure who it is. It might be Marbles who's doing it. But what it is it's basically the knife that came in the mess tin. This is an actual World War I mess tin. Notice it doesn't have those two sides on it. It's just a metal plate. Let me see if I can get it to open. Got just a flat lid for a plate here, and then you got the bowl area, and the large handle that goes across, so they slop all your food in there, and you got this also. And that's the top of it, and inside would be a fork, a spoon, and the knife. Now, I got the fork and spoon around here somewhere. Don't know where, though. Let me set this to the side. But what we're looking at here is the knife. and this was made by LF&C, and you see there the date, 1917. This is when it was made. Got to remember, the war started, World War I started in 1914, but American involvement really didn't happen until 1917. We were latecomers to the war, trying to remain neutral, but failing miserably. It's interesting. We're trying to remain neutral while continuously helping the French and the British. It's also interesting that, an English-speaking country like the United States actually came in the war and fought alongside of the French. We took over areas that the French were fighting in. And it's interesting also, even our volunteer forces during World War I fought with the French, like the Lafayette Escadrille, which was the Flyers. They were fighting in Spads alongside the French. So, in any case, this was the knife. It basically, you'd think it's a butter knife, but this is not. This is a carbon steel blade. It can get razor sharp, an aluminum handle, and you got about a 3.5-inch blade on it, and it's really a very good little utility knife. And also, it makes a really nice boot knife. I actually used to carry this as a boot knife at one time because it's so lightweight and everything, and fits nicely along the leg there. So, and it's just a spear point blade. Very useful though. Can cut, nice thin slicer. So anyway, this is the first knife. This is a World War I mess tin knife. Okay, and let's talk about something a little more brutal. That would be this, the M1917 trench knife. There's actually two different versions of this knife, and I'm going to go into more detail on these knives in a future video, but this is the M1917. And if you notice, it's got the knuckle duster here, and this one is usually referred to as the one with the pyramids, because you can see the shape there. There's another one that has it bent over, and it's got the flanges on the side, which was the second version of this knife, which was known as actually the M1918. What you had on it, or the original ones, was a walnut handle, American walnut. Now this one just has a hardwood. This is made by Windlass Steelcraft out of India. It's a reproduction, but it's a really accurate reproduction. Now you have a blade that is all blackened out. It is not sharp. It is triangular in shape. Now a lot of people say that the triangular blades ended up becoming illegal to use after World War I because of the Hague Convention or because of the Geneva Convention. That is not true. The reason armies shied away from triangular blades is because they were less effective and less useful than a regular blade, one with a sharp edge. The thin, flat, sharp edge was just a more useful blade than a triangular blade. This can only do one thing, which is poke, which is what you're supposed to be doing with a bayonet, or in this case with this knife. This is really designed for punching someone in the back through the kidneys and stuff, and these were used in trench raids and things of that nature. They were designed for trying to silently take out a sentry. They were even designed so that you could come down into the neck area and hit into the heart. It's a 9-inch blade. It's, like I said, triangular. The triangle makes it a very stiff blade, very hard to break, nice and pointy. Should be able to get through the heavy wool trench coats. That's the other purpose of the blade and the length of the blade. The handle was designed so that you could punch if you needed to, or even hit back here on the skull, right there. There's actually two pyramids on the back designed for smashing into things. The handle goes all the way through. If you notice here, this has been brazed over and then peened down. and to form the bottom of the pyramid here. It is also pinned in place through the middle there, so the handle will not slide around or anything like that. It's just a heavy gauge metal that has been stamped with the pyramids, if you can see on the inside there. I'll be talking about this more in another video and talk a little bit more about how and why. But this was the M1917, and this one saw extensive service, more or less, in World War One. It proved favorable. A lot of soldiers liked it, but what they didn't like about it was the triangular blade. They liked the length of it, but they did not like the fact that the only thing you could do with this is use it to stab and kill people. They wanted something a little more useful. And that's why they came out with this next knife. And this is the Mark I trench knife. Now, some people will refer to this as the M1918 trench knife, but this is not really the M1918 trench knife. A later version of this was actually the M1918 trench knife. This was known as the Model 1918 Mark I trench knife, or simply the Mark I trench knife. I know it sounds kind of confusing, especially considering it is clearly stamped there, US 1918. It does not say M1918. And this one also says LFS and C underneath there, and then the date 1918. Has a double-edged blade, 6 3/4 inches long, so a much shorter blade. Blade is shorter by 2 1/4 inches compared to the M1917, and you have a more formed brass knuckle, and you have I believe the handle is more considered bronze than brass, and you have the flare on there to help protect your hand, and then the steel skull crusher on the back here, and notice the nice points on the brass knuckles there. This was a knife that they settled on after basically some troop trials where they were looking at 4 different knives. I'll talk about that in another video, but this was the one that they settled on. Now, a version of this made by the French that looks almost identical to this knife here did see service with American soldiers in World War I. That one will have a reposed lion on the tang with the words "Au Lion" underneath, AULION underneath the lion, or somewhere stamped on there. People question if that was actually a brand or a company, or if it was just a saying that that was put on the blade. I'll talk about that more in an upcoming video. But in any case, this knife, actually, the ones that were made in the United States didn't quite make it overseas in time. So they may have been issued to a few soldiers here in the United States. A couple of them might have made it over to France, but for the most part, the bulk of these, the war ended before they could actually make it over to France. So they ended up getting stockpiled, and then they were the first knives that started getting issued to American soldiers and Marines at the beginning of World War II. So that's the story of this knife, or the very brief story of this knife. And what you have is a blued blade, like I said, 6 3/4 inches long, sharpened edge on both sides, so double-edged, carbon steel blade. Now, the reproduction here uses 1080 carbon steel. I don't know what steel was used in the ones made with the Au Lion tank stamp. Whatever carbon steel the French happened to have available at the time. The Americans ones most likely used a 1095 or some other kind of carbon steel in there. But the American ones had a very nice finish to them and everything else. They claim that the ones made in France were a little more crude than the American versions, and that was mainly because, well, France was in the middle of a war, and it was kind of, supplies were a lot more restricted than, they were scraping the bottom of the barrel. They had already been in a war for 4 years. America was just getting into it, and we were turning out a well-polished knife at the time. But in any case, this is it. This is the Mark I trench knife, and more likely to have been seen with American soldiers in World War II than World War I. And I will talk more about this one in a future video as well. But in the meantime, okay, I don't know what else to say at this time other than, if you're out there, you see a vet, thank them. And if you are a vet, and if you're struggling, you're not in this alone. There are organizations that can help. Reach out to them, reach out to your friends and families. If you know a vet, do a buddy check with them. Make sure they're doing okay, because we're getting ready to go into the holiday season, and this is really rough for anybody who is struggling with any kind of issue. People without family, without friends, and it can be particularly tough with a person who has gone through some of the things that veterans go through. I can't imagine what a veteran of combat has gone through. And this is not a time for, for so many people, it's just a day off of work. For a lot of veterans, it's just one more day where they're struggling to figure out why, how, and they can feel so lost and alone. So reach out to them, help them if you can, and if you are a vet, reach out if you need help. Don't become one of the 17 a day. That's the last thing we need.
Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.